good to be with you. It's a privilege to be with you. For those of you who are visiting, so am I, although I live in Arvada. My name's Peter Munson. I've been a priest in the diocese for almost 35 years, and kind of in a stage of my life where I'm doing some interims, filling in on a short-term basis at different churches, but it's good to be with you today. For the last 2 weeks, I've been on a little bit of a two-sided, two-aspect journey. The first part has been helping my son, Zach, load all his family stuff into a 32-foot U-Haul van and help him drive the 16 hours a couple weeks ago from Denver to just outside of St. Paul. And he and my daughter-in-law, Jordan, and my now almost 14-month-old and only grandson, Slate, have moved there. And that was kind of the week before this. And then this past week, we had a family get-together in northern Minnesota where my daughter and son-in-law also came out from Seattle. And we rented a house on a lake, one of the 10,000 lakes in Minnesota, and got to do the vacation thing and fishing and boating. I wanted to share for you a few highlights that stuck out in my mind. I think the first one that comes to me is obviously playing with Slate and reading to him, but I think what was priceless was we stopped at a town called Crosby, Minnesota at a Dairy Queen, and we all got to witness his first time ever eating ice cream. And that was priceless. Loading up Zach's truck to go to the 2.5 hours or so north of the Twin Cities, I was amazed how much stuff we were putting in the truck, and I kind of remembering that with babies, there's a lot of gear, right? Another moment that stood out for me was between this lake house, which was right by the lake, and the lake, there's these Adirondack chairs, and at one point, I was just sitting in a chair talking to my late wife, Julia, which I've been doing for almost 4.5 years now, and kind of wondering about, which I've been doing now for 4 years, what does she experience about this family, this grandson she's never met? We feel her presence in different ways, but I'm so curious about that, and it's not like God has struck me with any brilliant answers, but I keep returning to talking to her and telling her, well, today we got to see Slate eat ice cream. And finally, this past Thursday, I was sitting on a picnic table behind this cabin with my laptop on the table with a breeze blowing. Of course, very different climate and nature in Minnesota, right? Trees everywhere. Birds, hearing the loons. If you've ever heard the loons in Minnesota, that's pretty amazing. And while I was doing that, Zach and the rest of the family had taken Slate out on this pontoon boat that came with the cabin. Did I mention that we didn't manage to get all of Zach's family stuff in the truck? Some of it is still in my basement in Arvada. And Zach said, Dad, we'll have to send for that later. Our readings today have a lot to do with the abundance that comes from God, how the people of God can turn away from and even reject all that God is offering, and about what truly satisfies. Let me highlight a few of the words you just heard. From Isaiah, Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Here's a great question. Someone has said, pay attention to the questions in Scripture. as much as you go looking for answers. Listen to this question. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? From the Psalm, the Lord is loving to everyone and has compassion over all his works. You open wide your hand and satisfy the needs of every living creature. From Romans 9, the context is Paul's writing about the people of Israel who've rejected Jesus as the Messiah. He says, "For I could wish that I myself were accursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my own people," that he's very concerned about. "My kindred according to the flesh. They are Israelites, and to them belong," they're the chosen people, right? So to them belong the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the worship, and the promises. You have to read the rest of chapter 9 and 10 and 11 to find out what Paul says will happen to these Israelites. And of course, in today's gospel from Matthew, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowd. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full, and those who ate were about, I'm going to say 15,000, right? Because it says 5,000 men besides the women and children. Call it 15,000. There is always enough in the economics of God. Why, just in Minnesota alone, there are 10,000 lakes. In Colorado, over 200 mountains that are over 13,000 feet high. On the small island of Jamaica, where I trained before I did my Peace Corps work, Blue Mountain Peak rises on that tiny little island to 7,500 feet. On Dominica, an island where I served for 2.5 years in the Peace Corps, a boiling lake, waterfalls galore, another 7,000-foot peak, and the right climate for growing bananas, citrus, mangoes, guavas, many other fruits and vegetables that I'd never eaten until I went there. In the Great Plains, fertile land for producing corn and wheat and sorghum and all the rest of it. But we human beings get anxious. We are loath to keep trusting in the God that we cannot see, even though the love of God is visible in all that's out there. We turn the abundance of God on its head and proclaim a false gospel. There's not enough to go around. And that belief, my friends, sets all sorts of awful things in motion. There are not enough jobs. There's no more room for immigrants in the U.S. There are not enough places where we can drill for oil. Back in the earlier times, there was a version of this. Yahweh, these commandments are too restrictive. We have to leave the gleanings for the poor and the foreigner. We can't work on the Sabbath. We have to stop working to come to Jerusalem to observe high holy days. We have to let the land lie fallow every 7th year. We need to provide sanctuary cities for someone who has accidentally killed someone. This is not what we want, Yahweh. Part of what we did when we got to the Twin Cities was put some of Zach and Jordan's stuff in a storage unit. Storage units are seen all across our land because we don't have enough space to fit all of our stuff in our homes. No matter our level of income, no matter our level of wealth even, we are tempted to think that what we have is never enough. I just need a little bit more. You can hear billionaires say that. Or I'll be happier if I have that second home on a lake or in the mountains or on a beach. More money and more stuff will give me security. I cannot trust in a God that I cannot see, but I can trust in having more and being surrounded by the people who think just like I do, the people who play to my fears, especially my fears about there not being enough. When I was the rector at St. Ambrose in Boulder, we started a relationship with a children's home and a K through 12 school in El Salvador. It's called Raymar. It's one of the organizations I raised money for when I walked across the country. One day, the director and principal came to Colorado so that she could meet people here and people that couldn't go to El Salvador could build relationships. And one day, Mari came to my house in Arvada, and she was asking a member of my parish a question in Spanish. My Spanish is kind of iffy. A woman named Ellen, who was bilingual, was answering her questions, and I went up to Ellen and I said, "What did Mary just ask you?" And she said, "Peter, Mary asked, so only 2 people, Peter and Julia, live in this house?" You see, I've been to Raymar a number of times, and I know that Mari lives in the dorm for the high school girls in a big open room with a bunch of bunk beds. My friends, today is a day when our scriptures remind us that the whole person, all of our needs, physical, emotional, relational, spiritual, maybe I could even say financial, can be satisfied only by God. Jesus had the disciples pass out the blessed loaves and fish. I hope you noticed that. Another part of the learning for the disciples was that the hungry crowd did not need to be sent away. There was enough right there as folks were gathering to learn from and be healed by Jesus. The feeding and the healing happened in the midst of the beloved community. All of them gathered around Jesus. As Zach and I did that drive through northeastern Colorado and a decent chunk of Nebraska, perhaps you've done that drive, I was reminded about the beautiful rolling hills of western Iowa. Holy cow. That included, of course, some amazing cornfields. As we turned north by Des Moines to head to the Twin Cities, we saw the abundance of God's creation. It's as if the surroundings were proclaiming our psalm. You open wide your hand and satisfy the needs of every living creature. Will we heed the words of the Lord given to us by the prophet Isaiah? Will we come to the Lord and trust him to provide us with what we need for life on this earth? And will we follow in the footsteps of the disciples and take what God has blessed around us and also in us and share it with those who are in need? That might be food. It might be sanctuary. It might be a place to live. It might be a listening ear. It might be taking someone to their doctor's appointment or to the DMV. I heard that Jesus was near a big lake in Galilee one time, but he went up on the hillside to speak to the crowd. I think he had them sit down. And there, as they sat on this hillside and looked down on that large lake, as they watched the sparrows and the finches and the ospreys and eagles fly by, as they noticed all the wildflowers around them, as they took in the fishing boats fishing down on the lake, they heard him say, "Don't worry about your life, what you are to eat or drink, or what you are to wear. Seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." As Slate was playing outside on Thursday morning prior to when I sat down to write my sermon, he found something on the ground. And he's in that wonderful stage at 14 months where he's really good at sharing. 14 months old. And he brought me this little treasure, which is something I don't usually see in Colorado. It's beautiful. It's an acorn from an oak tree. And he offered it to me. Sometimes he gives you something and then he holds out his hands and he wants you to give it back. He didn't do that. He just gave it to me and walked away. I think it might be something for all of us to consider for a moment. So I'm going to pass it around. We know this, friends. May we realize that we came to church today maybe to be reminded. Only God can satisfy our needs. Any of them and all of them. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.